What's happening, Cardinal Nation? Welcome back to the CardinOLL podcast, a classroom podcast that has been designed to interview expert leaders and gain their insight, which will help you take your leadership and your learning to the next level immediately. Let me start off with a great quote today. This quote comes from Tony Duvall, who's a high-performance expert. He says, most people are interested in success, but they are too busy and too distracted by their habituated day-to-day activities to be committed to creating real success in their everyday lives. Let me tell you, you don't want to miss any of our guests coming up, as we will be interviewing some of the top leaders in the community and at the university. These men and women have challenged themselves and are committed to being successful. These men and women have doing phenomenal work, so be sure to listen to the CardinOLL podcast. Now that you can find us on Spotify, on Anchor, and on Google Podcasts, as well as you can view us every Friday on YouTube. I am Dr. C. Sean Owens, as you can see by my moniker right there below, and also known by @the Professor Owens, where you can find me on most of my social media. Let me go ahead and bring in the incomparable Dr. Andrew McCart, who's my co-host for today. Dr. McCart, how you doing today?
You know, being called incomparable never gets old. At least once a week I hear that, and I'm going to suit up and show up just for that, if nothing else. But thank you, Dr. Owens. I'm doing great. And I know we got to do a commercial to pay our bills, but I just want to say here that I'm especially excited about this guest today. It's going to be great to learn things about not only leadership, because our guest has a background in budgets, confidence building, culture building, motivation, psychology of high-performing, we'll say practitioners, because I don't want to give too much away, but I'm excited. You already know that, and I hope you're doing great.
Hey, our guest today is a rock star. There is no doubt about it. Who we have on today, ladies and gentlemen, you will be thrilled to learn from this person. But before we jump into today's classroom podcast with our special guest, I want to let our listeners and viewers know that if you or someone you know is interested in getting their degree in leadership and learning and want to learn from award-winning faculty and be part of a nationally recognized program, you can check us out at uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. Again, that's uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. Now that we've got that out of the way, let me introduce to you our special guest. Now, Dr. McCart did a great run up to him, so I'm not going to say a whole lot behind it. But the one thing I will say is that our special guest today, he's from Ireland. He's a dad, which means he's a girl dad, and I'll let him explain more about that. He's a professional coach, and his passion for leadership and leading is phenomenal. If you looked at his bio, he has come through the ranks to reach the level he's reached, what we call the hard way. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our very special guest. We got him all. This is our first international guest, by the way. Our first international guest, the one, the only, Coach Christy Holly, head coach of Racing Louisville, Louisville's own women's professional soccer team. Coach Holly, how you doing today?
I've never been better. Thank you so much. I'll have to send a very big thank you check for that introduction. That was way too kind.
Listen, we always want our guests to feel phenomenal and feel like $1 million, because around here, when we start the podcast, we really started rolling. And so let's get it rolling, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Perfect. So on this podcast, we talk a little bit about leadership. We talk a little bit about learning. And obviously with you here, we're definitely going to talk about women's soccer. But when it comes to leadership, right, this is one of the core points of what we do, even in our program here at the University of Louisville in the OLL program. I want to know, from your perspective, how does Coach Holly define leadership?
I think, there's a wide range in options to it, but for me, within the organization, it's trying to influence those around you to live life in a better way, to grow and learn as people. And ultimately, my role as one of the leaders within this organization is to set the direction in which we want to go and influence those around me to jump on board with that direction. Mm-hmm. And the hope is that when their time at this organization is complete, that they leave here better people.
I'm never amazed or there's never any shortcomings when we have any of our guests answer that question of how do they define leadership. And yours is no different. I think there's always one unique principle that I pull from everyone's definition, and yours is you set the direction. Knowing that, we've had people say leadership is influence. We've had people say leadership is being anointed by the people. We've gone on, but other things. But yours was your one unique point was, you set the direction of the organization. Has that been difficult for you to do, being that Racing Louisville is a new program?
Yes, there's pros and cons to it being brand new, and I would say that the pros outweigh the cons. I'm very, very fortunate to be surrounded by some fantastic individuals who are like-minded and have similar aspirations. So I think for me, the big thing that brought me here was the alignment between the values that I hold dear and the values that are held dear by the people that are also driving the organization. So for that part, yeah, it was challenging, but once we were able to define what it is we stand for and where it is we want to go, the path became very clear. And then from that point onwards, it became about identifying and recruiting those individuals, whether it was players or staff members that were similarly aligned with us. Okay.
Dr. McCart, what do you have? What you got?
Well, thank you, Dr. Owens, and Coach Holly. I appreciate that. What you said about the alignment between the organization's values and your values. That's a key thing we try to talk about in talent acquisition. And I read just a little bit about your interview process here. And they said it's over 50 head coach candidates, people from different international backgrounds, and that immediately you stood out, and they didn't go into the values part, but I'm glad to hear that, because we do talk about that in our leadership classes. The question that I have for you here is, as you're thinking about that definition of leadership, who are some people that you look up to that exemplify your definition of leadership? That you're at. It can be kind of lonely at the top. They tell me I've never been there, so I don't know. But maybe you can let us know a little bit about that. And who do you look up to when you're?
Yeah. So when I'm, one of the people that I feel that I've tried to learn from as much as possible would be there's a famous soccer coach called Arjun Wenger. He's a French coach that coached in the English Premier League for a very long period of time, and I think when you look back at what he's done in his career, he's retired now. I think a lot of people would look at him as a bit of a visionary, someone who came in and he didn't immediately fit in because his thoughts were different and his way of doing things were a little bit different, but it ultimately helped evolve the game and evolve how athletes were treated at the highest level in the world. So I think that's fantastic because of the clear vision that he had and the conviction that he had within that, but also the manner in which he treated every one of his individual staff and players. He was very protective of them. He was very much about their own development and their individual success, which would ultimately lead to the collective success of the organization. So for me, that's something that I tried to learn a lot about and try to take as many lessons from that. And then on my own personal interactions, I was very fortunate to be surrounded with many different members of family who had a huge influence on me. And my grandmother was one of them, someone who was very big on education, very big on treating people fairly on face value, rather than what you may have heard or what you may have seen or what you may have been told prior to that. But ultimately, the care which she put forward for people and the encouragement that she always brought with her with regards to furthering yourself. And it was always nice to be around people that enjoyed watching others be successful and helping others be successful.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Coach, because that's something we talk about in our department with knowing that we have each other's back. And I think that goes a long way in really giving someone the courage to go out there and take risks and to face a challenging project that may mean, in our world, if something doesn't go right in your job, you may get booed by a stadium full of people. In our world, we get an evaluation from an anonymous person months later. That's a little easier than the criticism that a head coach may face. But it does mean a lot, whether it's players or coaches, to know that someone's got your back. It gives you that courage, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's vitally important. I'm very fortunate within the organization that the management are incredibly supportive. The ownership of the organization, the club president, the club vice president, they're very supportive. And I actually just spoke to one of our staff members about this. They actually enjoy watching their staff being successful. And on a personal level, I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive family who encourage it. And when there is these moments of adversity or challenges, that you've got two options: you can face up to it or you can disappear. And we're always encouraged to face up to it. And so through that, I try to bring that I guess style of influence and approach to the players that we have. We've got a very young team, and we talk about being brave. We talk about having, it's not, the line that I repeat quite a bit is, we're going to be tough on mindset, tolerant on performance, and how we approach certain situations. If we go into a certain situation, with a negative mindset, regardless of what the outcome is, I'm going to evaluate you on what your approach was rather than the outcome. So I think trying to have that influence on the players is important, because our leadership above me certainly has it on me.
Wow.
That's so tough on mindset, tolerant on performance. I want to be sure I got that right. So I wrote it down. And you gave us a quote from your grandmother before we started recording, and it was that every day class is in session. So I'm over here taking notes. I hope our audience is paying attention, because we've already heard some things that you're making advice on.
No, I've been very, very fortunate with that. And when we look at tough on mindset and tolerant on performance, I mean, you can look at it from both sides of the coin. One is, if you go into a certain situation that fully committed and you still have a level of success, I'm probably not going to try and celebrate the success with you and encourage you that, that worked. You had success without full conviction. We're going to look back and what your approach was. Whereas as we, I'm sure you guys have discussed in the past, failure is a key part of our own growth. So when we have players that go in, or staff that go into a situation full of conviction, full of confidence in the right intentions, and the execution isn't right, sometimes as we're young, when we're young, that can be very detrimental to our growth. But if we're, from my position, I can influence and encourage them to understand that what I'm looking at is how you approach the situation. Mm-hmm. I don't mind the outcome right now. Yes, I hope that we win everything, but if your mindset is to grow and challenge yourself and push your boundaries, we can work with that.
I've got a friend that says plan plans, don't plan results. And that's kind of similar, that you put your game plan together and you do the best to execute it, and then the rest is sort of out of your hands. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, Dr. Owens, I know you've got questions. I've got several I want to ask, but I need to be fair here.
No. Listen. It's always a back and forth. It's a great dialogue. That's what makes this podcast so wonderful. I mean, it's really just figuring out how great leaders lead, right? That's really what it's about. It doesn't matter who asked the question. But I alluded to the fact when I was giving an introduction that if we looked at your bio, you came up the hard way. And for those who don't know, I started off, I'm going to say football, but obviously I think Coach Holly understands I'm talking American football. Started off as a college football coach, and I started at the bottom, right? And I worked my way up to become a coordinator before I jumped all the way over into being a full-time professor. So when I say I look at your bio and it came up the hard way, it's telling me that your journey, you just weren't handed, a head coaching position. You actually had to earn it. So that being said, as the head coach of a women's soccer team, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of how, you got there and what led you there?
Yeah, for sure. I'll try and keep it brief so I don't bore you or other people. So I'm trying to think this. So I first came to America at the age of 10 years old. I grew up in Derry in the north of Ireland, and a lot of people don't fully understand the level of conflict and unfortunately violence that was going on in the north of Ireland. So I was one of the very fortunate people who was given an opportunity to come to America to get away from that. So I was at the age of 10, and my parents were the best, but I always tease them. They didn't even drive me to the airport. They put me on a bus in Derry, which was a 5-hour bus journey to Dublin Airport. And from there, I flew into JFK Airport as a 10-year-old and got a bus from there to a firehouse in New Jersey, where a host family who I had never met, never spoken to, came and picked me up. It was the most horrifying time of my life. And everything from the second I got off that bus, everything in America is bigger. I was a small little person. I was my host father was a police officer, 6'3", drove a big car, had big trains, big cars, big buses, everything, big houses all around me. I was like, what is going on? So I was very fortunate that I had that. So that became the first time I was left to myself to figure things out and my own devices coming across the world. And then I was very fortunate that the host family had such a profound impact on me. They had children my age, and it just became this thing that I would do every summer. I'd come out here and I'd work and try to make my way out here. But when I was back in Ireland, swimming was a huge piece of my life. I grew up in a very competitive family, a very loyal family that backed each other and everything. And I was fortunate that I was encouraged to do every sport that was imaginable. I don't know how my parents did it, but they had me at the swimming pool at 5 o'clock in the morning. They had me at soccer practice at 9 o'clock at night, and they did it. And they had one thing, they just said, if you're going to do it, you're going to commit and you're going to do it right. So I then went off, I did that. I was very fortunate to have various levels of success on a national level, and international level with various different sports. And then I went to college, finished with college, came to America, and I was coaching in America at the age of 21. Mm-hmm. I came out, I was making $125 a week and working about 80 hours a week. And I did that probably for 6-7 years, working with various different age groups and levels of play. And then I volunteered my time to work at a college. Worked at a college as a volunteer, and then I was asked to help with the reserve team for the professional team in New Jersey. They're our partners in the NWSL. So I did that as a volunteer. I ended up working in that club from assistant coach to head coach in the reserve team to assistant coach in the first team, ultimately to the head coach. And while I was doing that, I was working 3 different jobs, and one of them was as a volunteer with that. But it was because I wanted to earn it, the experience, and understand the challenges. I like being in, sounds crazy even as I said, but I like being in uncomfortable positions where I learn a lot about myself and hopefully can still help those around me. So that takes you to 2015, 16, and I stepped down from that position because of I was so worn out. And the next day took up a job cutting grass. So I went from coaching one of the top leagues in the world to cutting landscaping the very next morning, because I still needed to work, I still needed to make money, and that's just the way I am, rather than sitting around pity patter. And I was very fortunate from there. I was brought in with the US women's national team, and worked with them right through to right up to 6 months ago when I took on this position. But during that time, I was working in I took on a couple of side jobs as well. I was using my education, I was working with many different athletes from a sports psychology standpoint. I went and got my psychometry qualification so I could work with and help with various different patients. And then I also decided that I wanted to get experience. I worked in a behavioral health institute, but that was probably about this time last year when COVID hit, and I thought, all right, there's still work to be done. And, everybody wants to sit at home and say, well, COVID hit us, so we can't work. But it meant that I had to still go out and make money. And I figured working at a behavioral health institute, which was very, very interesting. I figured my approach was, if I could learn how to communicate with people in that building, then it might help me long term with some of the coaching challenges that we'll face. And then from there, now we're in August 2020. I got offered the position here, and I transitioned here in August 2020. And fast forward to February 24th, Here we are. I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a long-winded one because it's there's a lot that goes on, but it's been an amazing journey, and I've been so fortunate to be around so many incredibly talented people who have had such a profound impact on me. So I'm very fortunate.
No, man, I think that is great, right? Like, no one, I admire people that have had, or maybe it was because I had to grind to get it too, right? It was nothing was handed to me. Started off at the very, very bottom and just breaking down film. Like, that is the most thankless work. And the fact that you made 125 a week, I'm a little jealous of that because I think I probably made about 25 a week.
Yeah, I tell you, that was my full-time job, and it was all I could do. And I was doing it for so many. My brother got to see I was out in America, and he asked, he's like, should I come out and do this? I said, definitely do not do it. I remember driving down the highway in my car that was about 15 years old, counting the miles backwards because I was running out of gas, and I went from one practice to the next practice, and I couldn't turn on the air conditioning in the car because I was afraid of using up all the gas, and my socks were soaked, so I had to I actually was on the way to another practice, took off my socks, put them out the window, put the window up to dry them on the highway.
Right.
And then it got so hot in the car, I thought I'll just put the windows down and save money on the air conditioning, and I forgot that my socks were there. So the socks went flying out the window, and I had to do the next two practices with no socks. So yeah, there's definitely, but it's good. I even in my position right now, we've had a couple of people apply for positions here, and part of it is internships. This is meant to be the top level in the world, and we give them the opportunities, and they're like, oh no, I can't do that. I'm 21 years old. I need to make money. I'm like, you do, but you also don't get to just walk in. You got your stripes.
I think that's the bet. Like I just like you, like I look back and laugh, but I mean, when I was going through it, I was probably crying like every night. But like you look back and you were like, it was worth it. Like there's no way, you would have ever reached this level, knowing that was the end goal. My end goal was to be a defensive coordinator. I achieved that. Once I checked that box, it was like, what's next? And it happens. But we were talking to our guest last week, and we were saying that to people it says like it's overnight. Like, oh, Coach Holly made it overnight. The reality is just like 10 years equals overnight, right? If they knew that you had to go sockless at practice, right? Like
this is overnight.
Right. It is not overnight. Dr. McCart, what do you got?
Well, it seems to be a common theme here. The hard work pays off, and Willie Nelson said that they called him an overnight success, the country singer, and he said, overnight success sounds real good after 10 years in hockey talks, playing behind chicken wire, people throwing bottles at you. So, overnight success really sounds great. Yeah. Well, Coach, I'm glad you mentioned the sports psychology part, because I wanted to ask you about that. And it says here on your LinkedIn profile, which really just has a slice of your background on LinkedIn here. But and by the way, I was going to see if we could edit out the $125 a week, because if our boss hears that, we're going to step it up, Coach Dr. Owens. But anyway, got a bargain there, it seems like. But the sports psychology, you mentioned here, equipping clients with various mental models that allow them not only to overcome setbacks and injuries, but to improve their performance, prepare for competition. And I'm just personally interested, selfishly, like what can we learn from you about that for leadership and just success and overcome personal?
Yeah, I think it's a very undervalued tool. If we look at athletes, and many athletes at U of L will be spending hours upon hours in the gym, improving their physical condition. Then they'll spend hours upon hours in their respective domain, whether it be in the swimming pool, whether it be on the field, working on their tactics, their technical ability. But we don't invest time in ourselves and in our mental capacity. So I look at it, there was almost like I feel it used to be, if you speak about a sports psychologist, it means that you've got a problem. But to me, it's ridiculous. I look at it, and the phrase I always used was, we're here to stretch rather than just support. And it's skill acquisition. It's all about gaining additional skills. We go to the gym to improve our physical capabilities. We go on the field to improve our tactical capabilities. We can use our resources to improve our psychological capabilities. And as a coach and in a leadership position, I try to reflect back on some of those conversations and some of those experiences that I've been fortunate to have to help some of the younger players where and when they actually need them.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point there, that there's nothing wrong with getting help from a sports psychologist or psychologist of any kind. And if you look at the highest performing people in any field, they're working on their mental game. They definitely, whether it's golfing, whether it's giving speeches, they're visualizing that and achieving it in their mind first before it plays out on their field, whatever that may be in their endeavor. So you mentioned something else about the COVID and how things changed and still working during that time. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, and I'll set it up a bit as there was a story about American football player Jerry Rice, and they said that one thing about him, he was fast and he was talented, but he could also change up his speed. He could go faster, he could go slower, he could change directions, and that would throw the competition off. And there's a motivational speaker, business professor I like, that talks about during COVID, a lot of people are slowing down, kind of like what you said. That people are feeling the pressure, they're having trouble keeping up. And if we can be the kind of people that speed it up and really double down and turn on that work ethic, that we can get ahead during that time and during times like this of setbacks. And what do you think about, whether it's COVID or other times of setbacks, that pushing the throttle down and going even harder and finding the reserves to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I heard something the other day, which I thought was fantastic, which is the situation is not the problem. It's your perspective of the situation. So how you look at things is really right away a big thing for every individual. You can go through the different perspectives on it and how we view this and how we want to approach it. So we can see COVID, oh no, that means we have to sit at home and, I'm going to miss the opportunity to be on the field. I might miss the opportunity to be around my friends. Okay, but what can you do with that time? Something we talked about with the kids was that the playing ground is level right now. It's probably the first time in their life that the playing ground is actually level. How can we maximize that time? What skills can we add here? Can we sit down and watch video? Can we work on our own individual conditioning? Can we learn how to inspire other people? Because I think one of the greatest things about being a good teammate is improving the performance of those around you and influencing those around you. So how can we step back from the situation and figure out within that how we can get better? How can we add to what we already have? That's, to me, it feels like it's quite a natural response to this situation, but I think there's definitely people who've struggled with that and look at it as though they become tied down and the roots are now keeping them in place for quite some time. But yeah, I definitely think it's the perspective of a situation is the part that we can control. Okay, we can't control COVID right now, but how we view it and how we view that situation can be very influential as we move forward.
Yeah, that's great insight there, Dr.
So I guess I want to change positions a little bit, change perspective. Since you brought up perspective, Coach Hal, let's change perspective. We're talking a little bit about leadership. I want to dive in a little bit into just kind of how learning takes place. Obviously, with your background, I know learning is probably the mental game is going to be a big focus over there. So, in your opinion, how do you think learning has changed or is changing in the world of women's soccer from your perspective? Obviously, not as you're sitting as a head coach, not the
Yeah, I think with time it definitely has changed. With technology, there's so much now. There's so much information now that we have readily available. For example, 10, 15 years ago, I saw a great clip of from 10 or 15 years ago. I saw a great clip of some of the professional players who were standing around in a conversation and a heated conversation, trying to solve how they could have addressed the problem differently. And the biggest challenge they were having at the time was they couldn't even recall what the situation was exactly. So now in 2021, We just put the video on and say, okay, here's where you are, where they are. And here's how. So I think that's definitely a huge piece of the learning. And I think obviously we learn more about what each pair, there's probably more attention to how each individual learns. And there's maybe a little bit more of a tailored approach to each individual. There's the old saying, tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I will remember. I'll learn. And I do try to take that approach in quite many situations, because I think it's all good and well me talking or writing something down and off you go. But I think as soon as we get that engagement from the players and they show that they actually want to be part of this, we can get a lot more out of it. But I'm also, for me personally, I think when I first got involved in coaching, and you're kind of impatient and you want immediate success and you want the players to get immediate success, and sometimes we give them the answers too soon, and we solve the problems for them. Whereas I kind of look at it as guided discovery, which is it's a well-used term and it's a well-used approach, and that is my approach in many different situations. How we view that is maybe a little bit different. I look at it really simply as, I let them go into a situation in practice where they might fail. I allow that to happen because I want them. My answer is not always the right answer. My solution is not always the right answer. That's the thing about soccer. It's such a fluid, moving sport that there's more than one ways to find that outcome. So the old analogy I use, which is probably a little bit wrong, or it's not perfect, but if we with the bowling alley and we have the bumpers on the lanes, just as I see the ball about to fall off or the player about to go off in the wrong direction, that's our job, is just get them back in. Whether they get the perfect strike or whether they knock the pins down in 2 different attempts, that's up to them to figure out that solution. So rather than just giving them that straight answer, we're guiding them towards it and allowing them to own that process and become more self-reliant, rather than turning to the coach on the sideline and saying, oh, wait, I don't have the answer. How do I find this? So I think that, between technology coming in and just then individually for me being a little bit more patient and I guess maybe just the experience is becoming more patient and understanding of the process is vitally important for coaching.
And just for our listeners out there, just FYI, what is the average age of the average age of the player on your team as well as in the league? I'm not sure you know that answer off the top of your head, but
interesting. So I would say across the league, there's 10 other teams in the league, 9 other teams in the league. We're the 10th team, and I would say the average age amongst most teams is you're looking 27, 28. You're talking about the most elite soccer players in the world. The average age of our team as of today is 23.2 years old. We've got a very, very young team. It's an intentional decision. And we've sprinkled in 2 experienced players that we feel like can bring in real leadership skills and have a real ability to influence and guide the younger players.
And so obviously for everyone out there, a 23-year-old learns a whole lot different than a 28-year-old, FYI, just putting that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, very different than, I look at it, there's good and bad to it. I would say that the younger players are not scarred by previous experiences, so they come in with more courage and more bravery, and they're yet to experience that adversity at times, so that can be good. But then, we had a tough practice yesterday, and I challenged them and said, this is not about what's happened, it's about how we respond to it, and I want to see how we overcome that adversity. When you're younger, as we all know, any setback probably seems like it's the end of the world, whereas experience teaches us that setbacks are good, right? Those struggles can add to who we are as a person.
Most definitely. Dr. McCart?
Yeah, well, Coach, and do my research for this interview, I saw a quote that you had about listening to the critics, actually not listening to the critics. And someone was asking you, what do you think about this comment, some comment, and you said, look, it'd be easy to fire back, but that's just not my nature. I'd rather just be nice and quiet and get on with business. And that's the best way to be successful. And and even being successful, people will throw stones at that, is what you said. So you can't please everybody, but I think that's just a great attitude and a great quote. And how do you're talking about the younger, and I applaud you for getting a younger team to really build a program, because that's not, there's going to be some criticism too whenever you're playing. Everyone's 4 years younger than the average, and it's taken a while for them to learn lessons. How do you inspire them to learn things from you, whether it's not to listen to critics or anything else, some of the top things you're trying to get them to learn?
Yeah, I mean, that's very important, and not listening to the critics is in modern day is very difficult. Every social media has become such a, I guess if social media 10 years ago, which was such a powerful educational tool, now it becomes a tool that's used to just direct hate and vile messages towards people. So I think it's, for me, it's trying to set the direction for the team and encourage, let them understand, right, this is what we stand for. This is what's important to us inside this organization. And one of the first things we did was we put our vision and mission statement in front of them. And we asked them, they opened their own little booklet and put inside their booklet and asked them, write down your purpose for being here. Write down why you're here. We know why this organization's here. Now you have to put down why you're here. So as soon as we get that alignment between us and between the collective and the individual, I think then it allows us to filter out and filter in what we deem to be important in order for us to be successful. And I think, it's an ongoing, in terms of dealing with the critics, that is going to be an ongoing piece for the younger players. It's an ongoing piece for every athlete, and it's probably more so at this moment in time. People enjoy throwing stones and being able to do it from behind a keyboard with no accountability. Whereas we talk to our players on a daily basis. Personal accountability is one of our key values. You got to own it. Sometimes you don't want to, but you have to own your actions and you have to be responsible for that. And that can be good on days, and then other days it's not. So it's trying to influence and direct them on what we deem is important, and hopefully with what aligns to what they feel is important too.
Well, I think that's a great point there. And it's if someone doesn't like me, there's about 6 apps where they can call me names right here in my hand. And I think the younger people that I know are more tuned into all that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
It's that would be a tough job to keep them to focus. But we talk about in leadership that there has to be a clear, consistent message from the top, or else you can get distracted by all the noise of gossip in the cafeteria or what you heard out over in the break room that people were saying. And so that clear, consistent message of let's focus on the main thing, I think it's
very, and that's very true. I mean, particularly in the women's soccer world, which is really growing aggressively, and it's fantastic to see. And I think, unfortunately, it's maybe a little bit of a cultural thing around the world where social media is now used, and in my personal opinion, it's been misused now, and it gives a platform to people to share hatred. So I think it's, again, to me, everything does not work in isolation. We don't just sit here and say just ignore social media, but then you can listen to someone else. The message is here's what's important to us, and here's what's important to you, and this is how we're going to filter through these processes. And when we established our values, ultimately the values that we hold dear are ones that we use when we're filtering through the decision-making process. And ultimately, if the players don't align with that, or we don't align with it, then we're either we're leading in a bad manner, or they're not in line with us, and we have to make then some tough decisions, because culturally that can be disruptive, and it can be very detrimental to the things that we want to do. So again, it's not just a simple case of being able to say stay away from this or stay away from that. It's more, in everything we do, this is what's important to us. These are the people that are important to us, and we do at times need to, we talk about trust being the most, is the cornerstone of everything we do, and it's vital to every relationship, and it allows consistent behaviors, and it allows us to receive feedback from people. And sometimes that feedback is critical, but when we've established that trust, we understand it's coming from a genuine place, and it's a place that allows that is it's been provided ultimately to help with your growth. Whereas if we can get that message across and make that strong, and they understand that when someone on social media decides to criticize them, okay, do I trust that person's opinion? Does that person? No, so I don't. It's not coming from a genuine place. So therefore, maybe I shouldn't hold it such high regard.
That's a great point, Coach Holly, that if we talk about a similar thing in leadership, that if you really want to know what's going on with your workplace, there has to be that trust there, or else they'll just say, no, everything's fine. If they're afraid of speaking up and losing their job or being demoted or something like that, you're not going to ever get the truth from people. Or we used to do industrial engineering, and we had to get their feedback on how are we going to improve the process. And if they thought they were going to lose their job because we made it so much faster, then they would never help us. But establishing that trust is, I think, it's important in business and industry as it sounds like it is.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it's the cornerstone of everything that we do here. It actually, for us, it leads to consistent behaviors, good intentions, authentic relationships. And for authentic relationships, we have to encourage vulnerability. Like, nobody sitting in this conversation is perfect, and that's okay. But it's through these different conversations and exercises that we do behind the scenes that we hopefully garner a real level of trust amongst the players to the staff to the organization, and from the organization back through every player. And it's, I don't know if much can exist without it, to be quite honest.
Well, I think that's a good point. And it's, we could talk for, I used to do lectures for 3 hours a night, and I have to rein it in sometimes because it's, these are things that we really love to talk about. I think it's really a foundational thing that holds up everything else. So Dr. Owens, please take it away.
Oh yeah, let me just jump in here real quick. So Coach Holly, what, as a head coach, right? What are 3 things that you have learned during your career that you wish the organization would adopt? And by organization, we mean the players as well. Either they have adopted, or, as you alluded to, I'm still trying to teach them to adopt. So what are a few of those things? It doesn't have to be 3. It could be 1. It could be 5.
Yeah.
But
I think ultimately, if you're talking about organization to the players, it's caring for the individual.
Okay.
Caring for that individual is vital. We're very fortunate that we have Lynn Family Stadium. We have the new training complex that's coming up, so it's world-class ambitions. But I think, again, the big part for me, which I always put to the players, is the accommodation that is provided for the players, the care away from the field, the genuine interest in the individual is so much more important than any fantastic stadium. Mm-hmm. And that's not to devalue the stadium, but I think so the care for the individual is so vital. And what's going on in their personal life, can we help? Can we provide guidance? If not, maybe we can't, but at least having that genuine interest. So I think the care for the individual would be key. For me, beyond that then is trust in the process that we've established. For me, in one of my first years of coaching professionally, I was very aggressive about, I wanted to win. I want to win. And then what happens is when we get so enamored with this outcome goal that every time we have a defeat or something doesn't go right in practice, it seems like the outcome is just so far away from you, and it seems so catastrophic. So I think establishing the process and trusting the process is going to be absolutely vital for us, because ultimately when we become so ingrained in that, and we've heard all the amazing cliches, which are great, which is, embrace the grind and so on and so forth. That sounds good, right? But we have to actually establish what that grind is. What we're looking to do. The process is where we learn. If we live in the outcome, we're just skipping through the days, and we're not experiencing, we're not learning, we're not enjoying it. So I think, the care for the player and establishing and then embracing the process, because those 2 things would be just so important to me, particularly in professional sports, because professional sports is about winning. But we could win maybe tomorrow morning and get some short-term success, but you can pretty much guarantee I'd be out the door within 6 months, because that short-term early success wouldn't have a foundation in place and wouldn't have a long-term system in place that maybe allow us to be sustainable for a long time.
Got you. So let me ask you this, and obviously I've never been a professional coach on any level, nor do I desire. I think I've always told my players, I said I would be the worst professional coach, because
You and I both, my friend.
Yeah, it just wouldn't. I think there's some fundamental philosophical differences of how that works. But I mean, it's adjusting the mindset. But when it comes to the win, you know, we know that as a professional in any level, you can be removed or reacquired or reassessed based on how many wins you obtain or how you go about getting those wins. What value or how much weight do you kind of put on winning games yourself? I mean, obviously we know your career is based on it, so there's some value or some weight put on it, but how much weight do you put on it?
It's a really interesting point, because everybody loves you when you're winning, everybody hates you when you're losing. And I'll be the first person to admit I am the most competitive person, and everybody probably says I'm overly competitive. It's, you know, I'll try to get out the door before the lights go out type person. But I guess ultimately in this situation, it's so unique because we're just in the embryonic stages of our growth, right? We'll hit the ground in April at some point to get into our first legitimate competitive game. So then the question would be, what are you deeming as success? So for us, there's no joke about it. We want to win on the field, but we also want to win off the field. And it kind of goes back to when we sat down and tried to establish what our vision and mission was. And, you know, our vision is where we want to go. The mission is how we want to get there. And we want to be able to be a world-class soccer club that lifts trophies at the highest level. But we also, a key piece of our vision is lifting the spirits of our fans and the communities that we live in and trying to provide that enrichment. So I feel a great deal of responsibility in terms of bringing in players that can perform on the field, but bringing in people that can perform off the field and understand the responsibilities that we have on a social level. You know, we could probably go into a really deep conversation about the challenges that not just the city of Louisville has, but the country of America has, and maybe a worldwide thing where there's so much social injustice. And having grown up in the north of Ireland and seen it firsthand and been on the receiving end of it many occasions, I have a real appreciation of what a powerful vehicle sport can be. And it can bring people together, even if it's just at 3 p.m. on a Saturday for 2 hours where everything's put aside and we've got one common goal, one common interest. So when we talk about success, every game that does not go our way on the field, it'll probably hurt me more than most, if not anybody. But I will also, this is part of the process as well, as what are we doing on a bigger scale here? How are we using the influence that we have on a bigger scale to try and redirect the way things are viewed on a social level? And I think we can, you know, if we don't win the title next year, but we've brought fans together, we've brought communities together, we've influenced younger athletes, I would look at that as well as a real level of success. But yeah, to your point, the wins and losses are always how you'll be viewed. But I try to take a step back there and see if I can help on a bigger scale as well.
Gotcha. Do you feel like that's changed as you kind of get older?
Yeah, probably. I mean, honestly, I think, like I said, you come in when you're younger, you're a little bit fearless, right? Because you think you're invincible. And as you said prior, is only invincible people are only invincible boxers or people are in the movies, right? But I think that comes with the lack of experience and lack of scars from those experiences. You know, like I said, I came out, I was like, I'm going to win the title. I don't care. I know what I can do. I'm going to put my head down and I will outwork everybody. But the reality is there's certain things you can't control within that. And understanding that there's a greater piece at play than just some players on the field. We every weekend, you guarantee I want to win. But I also want to make sure that today, tomorrow, the next day, that we're living up to our role as professional athletes.
Nice. Dr. McCart?
Well, Coach Hawley, I'm glad you mentioned so much about the community, because I was leading into my next question about that. And it was no secret Louisville had their challenges, especially in the summer of 2020. And sport seems to be a great vehicle to bring people together. We can, even if we don't agree on what team to root for, we can agree that that we're glad to be there and we're glad to be side by side with our the opposing fans and things. It's like you said, we can set things aside for a couple hours and just enjoy ourselves and be a way to really of healing. And I like what you said about seeing the bigger picture. And I think we get a little more miles on us, like you see that gray in the sideburns and things. We see that there's a bigger purpose to life around here, and it's not just winning the day, but about all of us winning in the bigger picture. And so, what more, if you don't mind, to say a little more about what we can expect from Racing Louisville from a community spec perspective and getting the community more involved?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, we're on a daily basis, it's part of a conversation with our charities that we want to be involved with, whether it's the youth academy, that's our youth wing of the club, and how our players can get out and influence and guide and become role models there. And then ultimately, there's bigger things at play here. Something that's dear to me. I've since I've moved here, I've noticed that there's a real large homeless community here in Louisville, and it's very difficult. I mean, the other day I think it was whatever night it was, because it was so cold, I went out distributing food, and goodness knows it probably didn't have much of a profound impact on too many people. But in the next day, I gave someone a ride to hospital from right by the stadium that was struggling. So it's something that I talked about to our owners and our players and our board of directors, and also to our fans, is we want to have these positive influences, and it's on. We got to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. But I think when we sit in conversations and we sit in these types of conversations, the thing that I repeated a number of times was, I would like us to be seen as the organization that puts your hands up first rather than put your hands out. And what I mean by that is, let's put our hands up to contribute rather than our hands out to take. And if we can, sometimes we'll get it wrong, right? Sometimes we'll get it wrong. But again, if our intention is to do right by the people, whether it's from a homeless standpoint, whether it's from a social injustice standpoint, whether it's from, inspiring some younger players or providing something back to the less privileged communities, if it's available for us to do, and we can change one person's way of thinking or the quality of one person's life, then I think that's a big win on a social scale. I mean, we look at this, and I can tell you our mission statement is, by striving daily to the highest standards, best practice, and aligned culture, we will impart each other to the best performances and enrich the communities that we live in. So it's good to talk about it. It's nice to have the words and the lingo, but it's even more important to walk that walk. And we definitely intend to do that. And as we grow and become more ingrained in the community around us, I would like to think that our impact can become even more profound.
I'm glad. That's a great answer, Coach. I'm glad to hear all that. And you all do have a platform. And as we mentioned before the recording started, I'm about to have a little girl, and there are people looking up to the players and you as the coach. And I think it's great that you've got a platform and you're using it for just the community. And I think that's something that we can all look back on when we do those things in our life. And someday people aren't going to want to tune in to hear myself and Dr. Owens talk about leadership, but
I'm sure they will.
Things to enrich. Well, that remains to be seen. But you're enriching the lives of others. That is that ripple effect that goes forward, which that you touched on so well. So thank you for really, kind of digging a little deeper there and sharing things that are important to you. We appreciate that. So.
Definitely.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's funny you said the ripple effect. That's something I bring up quite a bit. That's it's a post that we have where, everything that you do has a ripple effect. And it's trying to understand that. And I think when you're younger, and, I have a lot of learning to do. I'll be the first person to admit that, but there's a ripple effect to everything. I mean, one of the best lessons I got, I'll never forget, we were playing a game. It was live on TV, and we won the game. And my mother was back home watching it, and my family were back home watching it. And I got a text message saying, "Hey, good game, but you should be, the first thing you need to do is call your younger cousins and apologize, because your language is atrocious." And I just thought, oh, goodness gracious, I'm in trouble. That was far from rare is a saying that would have back home. That's far from the way you were reared. You were not taught to talk to people like that. You were not taught to respond to certain situations like that. So, yeah, that ripple effect. As much as I thought, oh, great, we won. I've taught them. My younger cousins think it's great. You've won a game, and the first thing I got was very humbling crash back the ground that you need to apologize very quickly, because that is not how you should be influencing the next generation. So.
Right.
No. Well, that's and you didn't have to bring up your shortcomings, but we appreciate the humility, because we can learn from that too.
So. I got plenty of them.
Yeah, so before we let you get out of here, Coach Holly, let me go and do our last commercial break, right? So, learning takes place in great environments, learning environments to be exact, and the University of Louisville is one of those great learning environments. Come challenge yourself to lead with compassion and expertise in a changing world, and learn from award-winning faculty in a nationally recognized program that specializes in leadership and learning. Check out our bachelor's and master's degree programs at uofl.me/podcast-OLL. Again, that's uofl.me/podcast- -OLL. So, Coach Holly, before we let you go, we do like to have a little fun with our guests. Okay, So this is a new segment that I've come up with. We call it Rapid Fire. I have 3 questions, right? Answer them as fast as you can, and then we'll get you out of here with a head scratcher, or has been for everybody else. First, rapid fire question. If you could pick one word that would describe your life so far, what would it be and why?
Different. And why would it be different? Because it's a path that I wouldn't recommend for some people. And it's certainly probably not what my parents put out in front of me to start with.
Number 2. What are 3 non-negotiable characteristics that anyone on your team or tribe has to have?
Honesty, humility, and loyalty.
Last rapid fire question.
Put me under pressure here, lads.
If you could sit with your 13-year-old self, what would you tell him?
This will be worth the squeeze. It'll be there's got to be some nights where you're sitting crying yourself to sleep because you get no family, you get nobody around you in America, but it'll be worth it in the end. Okay, I love it. So here's our fun question that I have for you. I'm going to change this up one day, but today's not that day. You can change it up whenever you want. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat here.
Here we go. If your life was the title of a book, made up or real, what would it be and why?
Oh, goodness gracious. That's a great question. So I was told it was suggested that I go with the word 10. And why 10 is because that's where it began. That was the first time I came to America by myself as a 10-year-old. And I guess ultimately the first time I moved away from my family and got on this theme or this journey of trying to do things that haven't been laid out in front of me before. So I was told 10 would be a good title for a book.
I love it. Great answers. I
don't know if anybody would buy that book, but that's what I suggested I go with. So.
Well, here's a funny thing, right? So you mentioned 10, right? So 10 is my magic number for 2021 because last year I read a book every 15 days and I did it, right? So I challenged myself in 2021. I'm going to read a brand new book every 10 days. So I would buy the book 10 simply because it lines up with how fast I have to go through a book in 2021.
It might send you to sleep in 10 minutes. Maybe that's what that'd be my sell point.
No. So before we let you go, and it's been, phenomenal having you as a guest tonight. Final thoughts. What is your wise counsel that you would shout from the mountaintops outside of come watch Racing Louisville in 2021? Or maybe that's what you would shout from the mountaintops in 2021.
I would definitely shout, come shout the team on. Stay off social media. and learn something new every day. That would be, I think I love people that just, I sat on here today and our technology guy was telling me how he used to be a stonemason. And I thought it was it's such an amazing background. And I think that's the thing, even from, I love speaking to people like yourselves, both of you, because there's lots of little things I take from this. And if you can learn something new every day, it doesn't have to be how to, change the world, but it's something that you can add to who you are as a person. There's the old, I don't know the exact saying, so I might butcher it here, but there's a man that died at 25 and wasn't buried until 72. And just, he stopped learning at the age of 25. So if you're able to just pick up something from each person, and that's you have to carry. That's why humility is such an important piece for me, is enter a conversation, hear their side, see their perspective, and see if you can take something from it. And maybe sometimes it's what not to do, which might be worth listening to.
No doubt.
Yeah, listen
no
to
doubt.
What to do. So, yeah, come support racing and learn something new every day.
We do it. And so we thank you for being on the podcast today. And we all learned some great nuggets. My notepad is full for the people who see that I show my notes to all the time. My notepad is full. Coach Holly is full of great things. Everyone, buy season tickets if they're still available. I was on the website. Some of the seats aren't that great, but that's a good thing because that means everyone bought up all the good seats for the season tickets.
There's no bad seats in this house, let me tell you.
No, they're not. The stadium is phenomenal. The stadium is phenomenal. It reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you watch American football, but it reminds me a little bit of the Las Vegas Raiders stadium, how it's kind of like surreal and black and just kind of this wrap around. I don't want to call it an alien ship, but what I mean? It's very modern. It's very
modern. It's actually tremendous. I've been in when we've only had 5,000 people. We're allowed up to, I think it's allowed up to 20,000 people. And what I found out the other day, that even when you look at it from above and from the side, you can see it's almost sectioned off like a bourbon barrel.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of, it's not just made up, So it's great.
All right. Well, we won't hold you anymore, Coach Holly. Thank you. We definitely will get you back on the podcast, hopefully after the season, and hopefully you have that trophy in your case.
I hope so, or I might not have a job. But also, huge thing is just a big thank you, lads. I really, really enjoyed talking to you guys and appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about Racing Louisville.
All right. Thank you. Dr. McCart. Phenomenal interview. What are your thoughts?
Well, Dr. Owens, and I hope Coach Holly goes back and listens to this, because with a last name like McCart, I always fancied myself at least part Irish. And I got one of those DNA tests one time, like recently in the last year, and turns out I'm only 3% Irish. I couldn't believe it. I demanded a recount, but I tried out 100% Irish. It was great talking to Coach Holly. I mean, what a generous man to give us so much of his time. And we talked a lot beforehand, even before the recording started. So I'm a fan. I'm sold. Louisville is just lucky to have him here. And I'm excited to see how Racing Louisville turns out this year and all the years to come.
Oh, no doubt. I think with him at the helm, Racing Louisville is they're setting the foundation of something great, right? And I think even the strategy that he kind of alluded to of even bringing in a little bit younger player, not going with someone on the team that's kind of been tainted. I think that's even a great tip, even for our listeners and our people in the OLO program, as you're taking leadership positions. It's always great to have, the seasoned veteran on the team. But sometimes, seasoned veterans comes with their own problems, because that's not the way XYZ did it. That's not the way ABC did it. That's not the way we did it over there. That's not the way. But when you can surround yourself with a little bit of a younger person, maybe not as seasoned, they don't really bring some of that with them. And I think that's an excellent leadership tip, if you ask my personal opinion.
No, I think you're right. And again, my notebook is also full of takeaways from this, developing people rather than just developing athletes, aligning their values with the organization's values, protecting your people and building that foundation of trust and having a tough mindset, tolerant on performance. I mean, this was a master class in leadership and winning psychology. I think, and I'm going to try to put these things into practice. Maybe even starting.
No doubt, no doubt. So let's get this last commercial out the way. The OLO program here at the University of Louisville fosters leadership, learning, and performance to provide relevant solutions for a changing world. We offer programs at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. Our programs educate professionals who focus on leadership, organizational development, human resources, and workforce development in an order that benefits the individuals, organizations, and society as a whole. To learn more about those programs, check us out at UofL.me/ELEOD-OLL. Again, that's UofL.me/ELEOD-OLL. Dr. McCart, final thoughts.
Well, I couldn't be prouder to be in the city of Louisville. I mean, there are just week after week, we talk to great leaders who are just right here. And there's a lot of smart, qualified, good-hearted people all working in the same direction to make our community a better place. And from the university to the hospitals to healthcare to the athletics, they're just, I think the future's bright, and I'm excited to have a front row seat for it.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I am excited to be sitting right there with you. So listeners and viewers, as we say around here, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. When you teach, you never know how many lives you will influence. And it is very clear Coach Holly is influencing lots and lots of lives. So Cardinal Nation, keep leading, keep learning, and keep influencing. We hope to see and or hear from you soon. Don't forget to check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Anchor. We drop our podcast every Friday. If also, when you like and subscribe to our podcast, you'll also be caught up on the information connected to the OLO program, because we do have several informational sessions coming up. So until then, take care and stay safe.